Okay, today we're going to be talking about photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is a very important chemical reaction. It's a chemical reaction that takes place in a plant cell and allows the plant to produce its own food. If you remember when we talked about chemical reactions at the beginning of the school year, when we were doing our chemistry unit, we said that a chemical reaction is when you have a new substance produced that wasn't there before. So you can see from the picture that whenever photosynthesis takes place, you have light energy being absorbed. You have carbon dioxide and water coming into the plant, carbon dioxide through the leaves, water through the roots. Those atoms get broken apart, regrouped, rearranged in a new way to make new substances. And those new substances are going to be glucose and oxygen. Also, you might remember at the beginning of the year that we said a chemical reaction can be shown as a chemical equation, as a way to kind of summarize what's happening in the chemical reaction. We're going to use the chemical formulas for the different substances. So for carbon dioxide, we're going to use CO2. Water will be H2O. We have light energy, and that's going to yield or produce, remember the arrow means yield or produce, glucose, which is C6H12O6, and oxygen, which is NO2. We also talked at the beginning of the year, we learned about reactants and products. Just remember that reactants are the substances that you start with, and products are the substances that you end up with. So we didn't include light energy here with the reactants because it's not actually matter, it's energy. It's not atoms that take up space and have mass, it's not matter. So these are just going to, the reactants are just going to include your actual substances. The other thing that you might remember from the very beginning of the year is that when we had a chemical equation, that chemical equation had to be balanced, and that previous board was not a balanced chemical reaction. So in order to balance the chemical reaction, we're going to have the same number of atoms on the beginning as we do at the end. And so this is going to help us support the law of conservation of mass, which we learned about previously. The law of conservation of mass says that the mass of your reactants, the things that you start with, has to equal the mass of the products. And the reason is, if you remember, was that we're not making matter here. We're not destroying matter during a chemical reaction. It may appear that something is gone, but all of those atoms that you start with are still present somewhere. And so in order to balance this chemical equation, you're going to add in your coefficients. Remember, that's the big number at the beginning in front of the chemical formula. And so here we've added 6's in front of these three substances so that our chemical reaction will be balanced, our chemical equation will be balanced. So you can see that we have 6 carbon on our reactant side. So we have 6 CO2 molecules, and we have 6 carbon here on our reactant side. For the oxygen, we have 12 oxygen here because we have 6 O2s, part of this carbon dioxide, so that's 12. And then we have 6 oxygen here in the 6 H2Os. So that's going to give us a total of 18 oxygen. And then we have 12 hydrogen. So here in H2O, we have H2 6 different times, so that's going to make 12 hydrogen atoms. After our chemical reaction in our products, you can see again we have 6 carbon, we have 18 oxygen because here we have 6 oxygen and we have 6 O2s, so that means we have 12 oxygen atoms here for a total of 18. For hydrogen, we have 12 hydrogen here, so our before equals our after. We also are going to talk about where photosynthesis takes place, because photosynthesis only takes place in plant cells. It takes place in plant cells because plant cells have the organelles in their cells called chloroplasts that are able to do this chemical reaction. Without the chloroplasts, an organism cannot go through photosynthesis. So this particular organelle, the chloroplast, has chlorophyll in it. Chlorophyll is the pigment that makes it green. It's also what's able to absorb the light energy. So when the H2O comes in from the roots and the CO2 comes in through the leaves, they're going to go into the cell's chloroplasts. They're going to get broken apart and regrouped into that glucose and oxygen for our products. Now, this is taking the light energy and it's storing it as chemical energy here in the molecule glucose. So why is that important? Well, photosynthesis is important because every living cell needs energy. That's one of the needs of all living things, and a cell is the smallest living thing. So all living things need energy. And in order to get that energy, photosynthesis is going to capture the sun's energy and store it. So then that glucose, that stored energy, can be used by organisms. This is actually an energy transformation. We learned about energy transformations earlier in the year because it's transforming and changing the light energy into chemical energy. It's taking the sun's light energy and storing it as chemical energy in the bonds of glucose, that sugar molecule. And so because of that, this process is producing glucose and it's producing oxygen. So it's important because it's giving things that can't make their own food, glucose, and then also it's giving all living things oxygen for cellular respiration. Now the plant is going to use some of that glucose. It's going to break it apart through cellular respiration. It's going to use some of that oxygen for its own cellular respiration, but the excess glucose is going to get stored by the plant, and then other organisms can eat it for that energy and the glucose. And then it's also going to use some of the oxygen, like I said, but the excess is going to be released into the atmosphere for other organisms that need oxygen.